Hi, everybody. Welcome to The Take. I'm your host, Krishna Mano, and I'm super excited because in today's episode, we'll be talking to the president and CEO of New American Leaders, the only nonprofit organization in the United States that helps empower immigrants and refugees to run for elected offices by providing them with the tools and resources that they need. Please welcome to the show, Ms. Ghida Dagher. Ms. Dagher, thank you so much for taking the time for this interview. It's an honor to have you on the show.
I'm so excited to be here and to be speaking with you. It's so much fun to be able to do these, and especially
Thank,
with you. I've known you for several years now, and I'm excited to be on the show.
thank you so much. To start off, could you please tell us about yourself, your journey to the United States, and what you do today?
Yeah, of course. So I moved to the US when I was a couple months shy of 10 years old. My family and I, we came as refugees. We came seeking political asylum when we arrived in the United States, and we were escaping civil war in Sierra Leone. For background, I'm 100% Lebanese, but third generation Sierra Leonean, and I'm a first generation American. And so I come from a line of immigration from place to place. My family left Lebanon seeking economic opportunity and strife back in as early as the 1800s, and then some of them up until the 80s and 90s. And of course, Lebanon was going through a tough civil war and then an invasion. And then when we left Sierra Leone, it was because also another civil war. And so it was very tragic, very sad. But we moved here, and it was a big change for all of us. I have three siblings. We're all 4 years apart each, and we came at very different times of our life. And it was a really big adjustment for all of us.
For sure, thank you so much. And like you were speaking of, as an immigrant who came here at a young age, what was something that you found difficult to adapt to in American culture that at the time was somewhat of a culture shock to you?
Yeah, there was like a couple silly things, and then a couple of things that were a little bit more serious. Some on the silly front, or things that were more superficial. It was an adjustment to see people drinking from water fountains in school. Other places in the world don't have clean drinking water and accessible water in the same way that we do here. In my classes, I adjusted to an American education system. In that my schooling was in British system originally, and so I spelled everything with S's instead of Z's, or OU's instead of O's, and etc. And so those were the slight adjustments that are, but on the deeper level, I think what the biggest adjustment for me was, and striking, is that when you are an immigrant or a kid that comes from a traumatic experience like war, you come to the United States, and folks who are born and raised here have lived in such safety and security and stability that it's such a privilege. And when you come from that background of instability or insecurity, the adjustment is a mental shift to say, like, my colleagues or my peers in my class may be not understanding what I'm going through, or what to them might seem stressful is not stressful to me, and my stresses might be different. So it's really a shift in a mind frame. And so that took a little bit to adjust to, this idea of, hey, we don't have to run again for a minute or for a while. We can be stable here. I don't have to fear an attack of some sort or a war of some sort, because that's very unlikely here, right? And it's such a privilege to have that. And in other places in the world, not everybody has that. So that was a big adjustment.
Definitely. And how do you feel that other students in your class, for example, or your teachers, accepted that shift and change that you were feeling? Were they more accepting of it, or do they just not understand where you were coming from?
I don't think any of them were even remotely aware of what I was going through as a student. I think some of the teachers were, and some of the teachers were not. Some of them, I would, something like uh, kids' birthdays in class, and somebody was upset that the cupcakes are vanilla versus chocolate. Those are a big deal to you as a 9-year-old kid, of course. But when you're coming from a different background, it was. But I was very fortunate to have a couple of really supportive teachers who I think understood maybe the trauma that would come with being a refugee or the challenges, and they were very supportive. And I we moved to a city to Dearborn here in Michigan when we were kids, and the fortunate part of that is that Dearborn has a very large immigrant community, and the school system was used to having immigrant kids and folks who are coming from different backgrounds, and so I felt like the school system was well adjusted and could address my needs for the most part. And so I will say I was very fortunate. Now, had I gone to an area like most refugees in this country where they might not be prepared for a lot of immigrants or are getting displaced in somewhere that's remote or placed in somewhere that's very remote, they might have a much more difficult time. But that's one of the beauties of Michigan as a state. It's very diverse, and we have these really culturally rich pockets and communities across the state. And we were fortunate enough to end up here, and that was by choice from my parents because we had an aunt and uncle who were here, so we knew folks that we that shared some of our cultural backgrounds and maybe our experiences, and were here to support us through that change.
For sure. And when looking at how, these past experiences, these lived experiences that you've had before in your childhood and even afterwards, and how that's affected your current work today, could you please talk a little bit more about how your immigration journey has impacted your work at New American Leaders and what specifically this organization does?
Yeah, so New American Leaders is the only national organization that's training and preparing immigrants and children of immigrants and first and second generation Americans to run, win, lead in our democracy. And so that means everything from running for office or leading campaigns or pursuing an appointment. That is all the work that we do to prepare them and advance them in that way and get them to see their own lived experiences as strong assets that are needed in our democracy and what they lend to our democracy. So, as an immigrant and a refugee myself, I have had a lot of these lived experiences. And for me, I often walked into rooms where I was the only or I was the youngest. I was one of the first, I was the youngest woman, or maybe I'm the first Arab or the only Arab or the only immigrant in a room where policy decisions were being made or organizing decisions that were being made. And I often reflected and I thought to myself, why aren't there more like us? People that look like me and you, who clearly come from immigrant backgrounds, right? And are very proud of that. And what would that mean for our democracy to have more of these folks? And so, what would it look like to have more of me and you in City Hall or in Congress or at the Capitol? And so, it really, the more I advanced in my work and in my professional career around policy and advocacy work, and then I served in government, which is how you and I met. But the more I spent time in those places, the stronger I felt about us needing more representation and having more conversations and people who can bring their lived experience to the discussion. And when I say lived experience, it's things like on issues that are everyday American issues that also impact immigrant communities. Things like affordability of housing, things like good education, economic opportunity, businesses, small business opportunities, those sorts of things that are so critical to our overall American economic health, the health of our democracy. All are critical pieces of the discussion, and it's so important that new Americans are a big part of that. Our demographic as a country has significantly shifted in the last 20 years, and it's going to continue to significantly shift in the decades to come. And there's going to be a point where it is a majority minority country, and so our democracy, for it to keep up with the demands and the needs of its people and its constituents and its citizens in a healthy and productive way, it needs more people like us to serve in office and lead campaigns and be in appointed positions.
Definitely. And you kind of alluded to this in your previous answer, but just to clarify, what exactly does New American Leaders do to help provide these resources for new Americans who are seeking to hold an elected office?
Yeah. So what we say is the run, win, lead in our organization. It's three buckets of work. The run work is this entire suite of training programs that gets immigrants and children of immigrants and grandchildren of immigrants to prepare them to run for office. And so, or to train them on the skill sets that they might need if they wanted to run for office. It's everything from learning the nuts and bolts of a campaign to messaging themselves. They walk away with a stump speech that they've written if they were to run for office. It is fundraising skills. It is learning from other elected officials who are also new American? And how do we not shy away from our identity, but lead and lean into that as a big asset? All of our programs are designed by new Americans for new Americans. And so there's no turning a cheek or turning a blind eye to who we are. I think you'll see that, and most people will feel in politics that they have to sometimes turn the volume down on their personal identities or ethnic identities. And we feel so strongly that you don't need to do that. If anything, you need to lean into that because it makes you stronger and more genuine and more authentic in your leadership. And what's for certain is that we need less generic and less buzzwords in our democracy and more real life and more genuine voices and more authenticity overall.
Definitely. And when looking at the 2024 election, considering that it is a very contentious one up and down the ballot, and now it's coming up in a few weeks, what has New American Leaders been doing specifically for this upcoming election, and how has the organization been empowering voters before this extremely important election for our democracy?
Yeah. It's a great question. A few buckets that I want to cover on this, a few different areas. One is, this kind of work isn't just, you don't see always the results of it immediately. It takes time and it takes nurturing of our communities. And, we may train you, for example, and then you may not be ready to run for another couple of years. And so sometimes it takes a little bit more time to nurture, while others may say like, hey, I'm ready to run now. Teach me everything because I'm ready to go. And so in this election, I'm really proud of the fact that we have 83 alumni running for office across the country in 16 different states at 9 different levels of office,
That's
which
impressive.
is
Wow.
so incredible. I get so excited every time I think about it. Look, I'm cheesing just thinking about them. And it is so impressive. And almost 60% of those people that are running are women, which is so important as well. 98% are BIPOC, they're people of color, and 15% are LGBTQ. So great diversity within our alum who are running. And these are, from local school boards all the way to members of Congress, hopefully. And so it shows that our network is effective, our work is important, and that, hopefully on November, during election day in November, on the next day we wake up and we have several more and hopefully 83 more new elected officials who are new Americans. So we're really excited for them. So that's on the C3 side, which is a New American Leaders. On New American Leaders Action Fund, it is our sister organization that's a little bit more political and can endorse candidates. So in addition to the 83 alum who are running, we have 49 candidates that we've endorsed as well. And it's really exciting to see that happen. And close to 45% are also women running for state legislature in particular. And that is such an important need across the country right now to have more women running for office, but in particular at state legislatures. And so I'm very excited about our alumni folks, our endorsees that are putting themselves out there and really trying to change the face of our democracy everywhere in this country. And of course, behind every campaign is a whole lot of people who are the force behind the everyday organizing, the volunteering, and many of those are also our alum.
Definitely.
And then on the other side of this is getting people out to vote. It's so important, not just to, the single fundamental first step of civic engagement is voting. And so it's so important that everybody takes advantage and utilizes that right that they have to actually get out and vote. And so we're doing a lot of GOTV, which means get out the vote, of getting folks organized and reminding them that they could do early voting, that they know where their polling locations are, and making sure that they understand that it is on the ballot, everything from the president of the United States to school boards. And very important decisions are made at every single one of those levels. And this is our opportunity for our voices to be heard. And so in the same way we want more new Americans to run, we want more new Americans to vote.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And when looking at specifically how important this election is, I came across this article recently from the Pew Research Center from September of 2023 that essentially said that America currently is the most polarized that it's ever been in history. So do you think that this increased representation of immigrants and minority groups in modern day politics can actually help reduce the extreme polarization and divide that we see today in our country?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it can lend to that tremendously. I think the more that we are able to be in those spaces, the more that people understand not just only us, but the issues that we face. I think it's very easy to say and pin people against each other in politics and to say, like, oh, this person is advocating for higher wages because the employees are greedy. And for the employees to say, well, that employer is greedy and they don't want to pay us more. But when we're sitting together at a table to have a conversation, we can talk about the challenges on either end and how we can come up with a long-term plan to get both fair wages for workers and also ensure that businesses are able to stay in business and functioning and thriving as well. And so that's one example of that, what that means. And so it's really important that we are bringing ourselves and we're bringing our full selves, not again diluted versions of ourselves. Our democracy overall is healthier when there's more conversation and there's more representation. If you have a one monolith of a voice in a room, then the results are going to just serve that one group of people. It's not going to serve the overall good of the public that is supposed to be. And these entities, these institutions, these places of power, like your city hall, is meant to serve all folks. And so you want to ensure that our voices are there. We do a report every 2 years at New American Leaders called the State of Representation, and it measures the parity of state legislatures and how much they represent of New American communities, how many people in office that are serving are New American. And we're not at parity. There's definitely a disparity there. And in every single state, almost with the exception of a handful of states that are above parity. But, there is incremental growth that is happening, and it's really good. And I will say that between 22 and 24, we've seen an increase of 21% in representation. And those states that have more representation are healthier, are more productive, are able to accomplish more and address the needs of their constituents more.
Got it. Thank you so much. And like we said, this election is about to come in just under 2 weeks now. So then when looking further into the future, what work is left to be done to include the experiences of these new Americans or recently immigrated Americans in both our civil and political society?
Yeah. I think on the political front, as I mentioned earlier, this is work that has to continue. It's a long-term investment and it's building year after year after year. So it's safe to say our work is not done after election. You have to think about it as building blocks. You can't build a house and just lay one brick and say, oh, we're done, right? So you got to lay more bricks and then layers upon layers and upon layers. And so it's really important to us to think about if this is your first time voting, how do you build on that? What does that look like next? Is it taking people? Is it volunteering on campaigns? Is it taking your family members? Is it eventually running for office or working on a campaign? And those are all layering of that for the everyday person. For us as an organization, as New American Leaders, layering means training more people in more corners of this country, in more levels of government, and reaching new heights in what we're able to accomplish. And it's also, for us, we've been investing a lot also on the research front, so we can measure the impact of the work that we're doing and also measure the impact of new Americans in office. And here in Michigan, you have multiple new Americans who are just phenomenal leaders. Everybody from State Senator Stephanie Chang to Ranjit Puri in Canton, to Darren Camilleri in Downriver. We have phenomenal folks who are taking on really big issues, and I want to see more of us do that, not just in Michigan, but everywhere across the country.
Definitely, and touching on that point, like you said, currently New American Leaders is the only nonprofit organization in the country that's pushing for this kind of advocacy for new Americans in political society here in America. So is there any work that you or your organization have been doing to expand this messaging, not just in Michigan or the Midwest, but across the country as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're a national organization. We have trained folks from 46 different states, including Alaska, which is so cool and exciting. But we want to continue to build on that and deepen our relationships and our presence in certain states. And Michigan is one of the states that we double down our investment because we know how important it is, not only as a swing state, but also as a state that has a big immigrant population and has always had big immigrant population in the history, a proud history of immigration. So how do we build on that? But in addition to Michigan, New York, Georgia, Arizona, Colorado, Nevada, California, those are also really important states to us, and we're continuing to build. We're offering phenomenal programming in 2025, including trainings in many of those places that are open for folks to apply to. We also will have a couple of women-specific programming. And one really cool program that we're going to do this year is it's a well-known fact that women, when they run for office, face more challenges. And when you're a new American or a woman of color, those challenges add up. And so we want those women to be extra prepared. And so sometimes you run and you don't win, but it doesn't mean that you can't run again and shouldn't. If anything, you should, because there's learnings and losses, but also it helps you build your name as you go on. And so we created a program for women who also have previously lost, and we want them to run again. But I'm really excited for our Michigan training that's going to happen at the end of January in Detroit. And so would love to see people who are interested in this kind of work, whether they know they want to run in the future or maybe they're just interested and they want to learn more. We highly encourage them to apply and check out the work.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And to end this interview on a lighter note, you've previously said that in an alternate universe, you would want to be a travel photojournalist. What is the inspiration behind this dream career?
Yeah, that's such a wonderful question. I see beauty in a lot of people and I see beauty in a lot of different places. And often we overlook those because our lives are so fast paced and we don't take time to really absorb the small, beautiful things in life. And also, I think the United States is so big and many Americans prefer to travel here or feel that things are so far and can't be reached, or sometimes we just don't have means as people to go see these places. And I think photojournalism is such a beautiful way to capture the world and to ignite imagination and hopes for travel and dreams, but also familiarize yourself with other parts and other people. And I think there's so much at our core as people that brings us together and that divides us. And we create some of our own divisions by choice. And I think, when you travel and you see the world, you learn that quite in such a tangible and real way. And so photojournalism is a way to share that with people.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ms. Dagher, for joining us on the show today.
Thank you for having me. This has been so much fun.